15 years, working with art for 20 years. I remember when I asked Stephen, where are you? That I needed or I wanted somebody to work with the youth in school with theater. And why was that? Because we had tried working with other forms of arts, and the youth had come in, adolescent, but they were nice to us, so they would accept doing mask, cartoon, drawings, and so on. But in fact, that wasn't cool enough or extreme enough. And when we asked them, so what do you want to do? And they said, we want theater. So we began working with migrant children in school, not selecting them, but in some of the high schools of Montreal, 95% of the kids are migrants, first or second generation. And some are in what we call cheminement particulier. So we conceptualize that it means they're in special class, which means they're failing. And we conceptualize that as a double exclusion linked to the minority status, but which usually kind of structures them toward academic achievement. But when they do not, when they're not able to do that, then it becomes a double exclusion because they're also an exclusion of whole society norms, but also of the dream. They're excluded of the dream of their parents. And that's very difficult because they have to cope with the failure of this family mission, which was transmitted to them, the sacrifice that the parents have done often for them to succeed. And in the parents, we find this denial of the evidence. The damaged child will recover. So we have parents talking about kids with mental retardation and telling us, and they know about the IQ of their kid, oh, but he'll go to university. He will become a doctor. So you see that it's impossible to mourn this dream. Or endorsing the kids, the negative image projected by the whole society. So that's a kid with Asperger who was teased and bullied, and he said, of course, I'll be a terrorist. Different ways of rebelling against the exclusion. And in a lot of these youth in high school, they prefer to be bad rather than stupid and opt for marginality. So if you're excluded, you can decide that you're going to opt out. You will exclude yourself rather than being pushed away. So in that context, we begin doing drama workshops. It's kind of a mixture now. So of course there is a bit of playback. That was Stephen's idea at the beginning, and I think it's interesting because playback theater goes to the capacity to express your inner story or all the story you carry in life. And that's very interesting. But it also have Boal theater forum component. So Boal is from Brazil, and this is a much more of a political form of theater which express the collective experience and the capacity of the collective to transform that experience. Now, presently, the form of theater we used is, especially in those special classes, much more simple, and it entails a lot of theater exercise, play, and stories. But then the stories are often also very, very simple. So this was the initial team of comedians. Now, when we do theaters, playback, or whatever in classes now, because of cost, very often we have two-person working with a teacher, and we're training the teachers, and very often a lot of teachers are doing them by themselves after, and it works quite well, we think. So the objective initially was to give immigrant and refugee youth a chance to reappropriate and share stories, individual and group stories, building multiple collective identities, exploring them through group theater to construct meaning, also grieve enough to institutional racism, structural racism, but also migratory losses, transgenerational losses. appreciation of differences also, and development of a multiple affinity, so the capacity to transform in different ways. And the first study we did was more qualitative. And what it shows was that the reenactment of the story allowed the transformation directly, indirectly, and metaphorically. And it did have an empowering effect on the youth. And they were able, as we sought, to construct meaning and support grieving some of the losses associated with their individual and collective experience. Now then we did a randomized controlled trial. That's very serious. But we did it because, you know, when you work with art, in the medical field, you certainly need to establish some credibility. And then you need funds to go on doing the work with art. And so doing research is a good way to do both of these things, to go on with the work and to gain some credibility. And the result was that, in fact, the drama workshop decreased the impairment associated with the symptom quite significantly. So that's a nice schema. And also, interestingly, it improved math performance for the boys. And that was a real surprise. Now, I'll tell you, a colleague of us, Françoise Armand at University of Montreal, just finished with our team a big study now on writing and theater. And she also have an experimental and control group and a third arm, but I won't enter into that. And she has the same results with writing. So theater and the capacity of expressing oneself through drama, significantly improving cognitive capacity. We have the same, by the way. I'm looking at José with sand play in little kids, so cognitive capacity increasing significantly. So all of those are good news. You will say, where is the failure? So we did a surge study in classes which are called for underschooled. Underschooled are kids who have more than 3-year delay in schooling, sometimes 4, sometimes they've never been schooled, and they come here as adolescents. And the results were in the same direction. With the fact that youth who have been, but that was a relatively small group, youth who had been exposed to pre-migratory violence seemed to benefit more than their peers from what was happening. So these were all recent migrants, but they were very delayed at school or had absolutely no schooling. And we had a bit the same effect. Now, we did then a fourth study, which was an even bigger RCT in special classes. And we had worked before with special classes. And we began this big study, and you know, it was huge. I'm showing that just to impress you a bit. We had 30 classes, tutorship compared to theater, compared to control. And suddenly, as we were meeting with the tutorship group team and the theater team, I began hearing that those teams were hurting. They were unwell. There was a lot of violence in the class, and they felt they couldn't make the space, the tutorship space or the theater space, a safe space. They felt the teacher were overwhelmed. The teacher kind of had to resign often or participate in the ambient violence in different ways. And then we changed the objective. We said, oh, look, because we ask ourselves, should we stop? And they said, no, but some good things are happening. So I asked, is it safe? And they said, we're not sure. And so the objective became not to succeed, not to prove the hypothesis, but to survive. We said, okay, we're going to go on. I want all of you alive at the end of this trial. Well, it was a minimal objective. We succeeded that. No, but some of the members of the team received threats. It was hard. It was tough. And And we didn't want the kids to be harmed. You know, when you create or establish an expression space, if you are not able to guarantee safety, you put people at risk. They could hurt each other, or they could be hurt by revealing themselves in a non-safe space. So that's, again, to tell you it's very... So the summary of outcomes said, okay. The summary, I can go back, but what it says is the theater had a significant impact, but for first generation. Our mathematical model is so complex. It's Rousseau who did it for me, and he explained it to me 10 times, and I still felt stupid the 10th time. But what I said is it's very robust, even if I don't understand all of it. So what I can tell you is the theater had a significant effect for first generation kids. But for second generation, and that's the youth estimate, on the theater, on the teacher estimate, we were on the other side. So it seemed that the symptom or the impairment as measured by the teacher had increased for the second generation, not for the first generation. So the first generation were saying, in a sense, yes, we're less impaired and we have less symptoms. But the second generation, the teacher was saying, these youth are not improved and they even may be worse off. So what does that tell us? I think that the result indicate that for first and second generation, you may have different effects. And that suggests, because before we had worked almost always in welcoming classes, even the underschooled who are very, very delayed cognitively were first generation. So recent migration, like crisis, may be a privileged window to intervene before, because there is still hope, because you may shift things around, because there is a capacity of transformation, even if there is suffering. It also suggests that safety in special class and in other settings, and we have to think about that in some hospital settings, may not be sufficient for expression to be helpful. And even we could say that expression in an unsafe space may be risky, may be hurtful. So let's not push people to express themselves in unsafe space. Remember Jorge Semprun's book on the Holocaust, L'écriture ou la vie, where he stopped writing when he was in his 30s because he said, I suddenly realized that if I went on writing, I would suicide, just like Primo Levi did. And so did Primo Levi suicide in spite of his writing or because of his writing? I don't think we can answer that. Those are difficult questions, but I cannot we should at least raise the question and say, when is expression hurtful? When is it harmful? When is it not safe? And when can we express ourselves? And when is it better not to be silent or to withdraw to our inner self? Yes, and the last conclusion is the ongoing stress and stigma of special class settings should probably be addressed systemically. So the idea is, in a very unsafe situation, I'm not sure that pushing people toward expression is the best thing. You should first reestablish some forms of safety, at least a bit. So the same thing, when is it helpful, when is it another form of aggression? In a research evaluation in a youth focus group, that was before the RCT, the youth didn't want to say anything in one of the class, and then they break loose when I said, come and play teacher. And they came, and they wrote this big equation and say to the other, you're all stupid, you're all retarded. And then they speak about their feeling of being betrayed, because they had told a story in class, and one of the boy who was kind of a bully in the class and a leader, he said the teacher told them, to the other teacher, that I have cried. So feeling betrayed, not feeling safe, you see. Now, what is interesting is we had done this work before, but we wanted so much art and theater to be helpful that we had not read the part where it could be harmful. We were saying all the right thing about safety and so on. So the good thing about RCT and their hardcore dimension is that it faced us with our denial that we wanted so much to be good and to be caring and to be healing, that we denied the part where, for some of these kids, what we were doing could be violent. So, in conclusion, art is a powerful but a double-edged tool, and the context of an intervention, the real-life setting, is of key importance. You cannot think that because it worked elsewhere or in a textbook, it will work. And that, I think, is true. You were speaking of improv. When are people safe? When is safety? Safety is a very, very precious but very fragile construct. How can we ensure safety? Transferability of programs may be delicate. And generability of evidence to special population is very problematic, I think. So you can say, you know, Cécile's team really did a bad job. That doesn't prove anything. I think that maybe, I'm not saying that we did a good job, but I think that raising question and facing this kind of question is important. Thank you.